Hannibal had been defeated at Zama, but events in this episode will take place between 216 and after that. Macedon had been embroiled in many wars, and their most hated enemy was Illyria. But the Romans were now allies with Illyria, and Macedonia knew this. With Hannibal's defeat, Rome could now defeat Macedon, who had been threatening invasion several times, especially during the periods between the Battle of Cannae and the battles of Capua. Seleucus wasn't going to threaten Macedon as he was embroiled in the campaign against the child king Ptolemy in Egypt. But because of an appeal by Illyria, Macedonia was going to have a war with Rome instead. The first ever Greco-Roman war between the powers of Alexander and Rome would culminate in possibly one of the greatest battles in history, at the Battle of Cynosepahale, and would see potentially for the first time Greece beaten by an enemy close at hand, apart from themselves. Welcome to the first episode in our Sino-Roman War, in our Greco-Roman War, in the Battle of Cynosepahale, our fourth episode in the Hannibal series is coming up. In 218 BC, as we covered in our previous episodes in the Hannibal series, Hannibal had crossed the Alps and defeated several Roman armies at the battles such as Trebia and Lake Trasimene. During this period, a 20-year-old Macedonian king, Philip V, who had just ascended to the throne, defeated the Achaean League during the social wars and turned his eyes west. In the summer of 216, Philip formed an alliance with Hannibal just before he defeated Varro at Cannae. In 216, in the winter of it, Philip tried to take Illyria, but failed when he had the approach of a 60,000 strong army of Romans led by Varro. Unfortunately for him, this was false, as the 60,000 strong Roman army was defeated by Hannibal at the Battle of Cannae, and Varro was killed in the battle. It's at this point that diplomats started going between the two, discussing how to split the territories of Rome up. Just after landing at Tarentum, one of them was captured by the Roman governor. In the questioning that followed, he revealed the plans for the invasion of Sicily by Philip. Rome now knew that the Macedonian king planned to attack and moved to block him. Unfortunately, Illyria declared war on Philip, possibly after being coerced by Rome. And it took 4 years for Philip to take Illyria, and when he finally did, one city wouldn't go under his control. This city was called Illyria, and it called for the Romans for help. In the same year, the Romans, commanded by Labienus, crossed the Adriatic, defeating the Macedonian fleet in the process. After lifting the siege at Apollonia, Labienus now marched from Oricum, where he wintered his army. Philip also wintered his army at the capital, Pella. In the next 2 years, Philip recrossed the Pindus River and attacked Apollonia once again, failing when supplies ran out. Roman problems of its own as Hannibal continued to ravage the Italian peninsula, and because of this, Rome was unable to send more men to Greece to help Labienus. But Philip, cocky that the Romans wouldn't react, took Lissus, which could be used as a potential staging point for an invasion of the Italian peninsula in 210 BC. At this point, the Aeolian League offered to join the war on the Roman side, promising that all loot unless jointly captured would go to Rome, but that the Aeolians would get all captured territories in the south. The only reason they did this was because of Roman victories at the battles against Hannibal at the battles of Capua and Tarentum. All the Aeolian allies joined the war. These were Sparta, Elis, Messana, Pergamon, and Illyria. The war was indecisive as Philip won against Sparta and the Ionians, while Rome beat the Macedonians in the mountains. Due to this, in 205 BC, both sides signed a peace deal at the Treaty of Cynosepahale. In 201 BC, Philip and the Seleucid king Antiochus I invaded Egypt and successfully installed the Macedonian king Ptolemy V on the throne. At this point, Philip rose in Pergamon and attacked Philip and ended up at the siege of Chios. Philip then took Caria on the island of Crete, backing the allies into a corner. At this point, the two cities sent ambassadors to the Romans asking them to join the war. Galba and Scipio Africanus, who had just returned from Africa, were all for it. But unfortunately, the People's Assembly, each elected by one town in Italy and Spain, as it was now known, and Spain now, unfortunately worked. Luckily, Philip, taking Abydos, defeating yet another Rhodian army under Colonies, persuaded the People's Council to go to war. The Second Macedonian-Roman War had just begun. Galba, who'd been preparing for weeks for the invasion, sailed in June of the year 2200 BC, while Philip marched his army at breakneck speed back to Byzantium and across the Pindus River. After 2 weeks of stalemate, Galba was replaced by Publius Villius. Fortunately for Villius, he immediately had to face a mutiny among his soldiers. As both armies marched to the Ouse River and camped opposite each other's armies, Villius was replaced by Titus Flamininus, who actually was one of the most inexperienced in the army. At the Battle of the Ouse River, Flamininus managed to outflank Philip, forcing his retreat back to Pella. Unfortunately, Flamininus got bogged down in the siege, and when that was finished, he had to winter in the city which had besieged Athens. In May of the year 197 BC, Flamininus got reports that Philip's newly recruited army was at Pare, so marched to the area, beginning the Battle of Cynosepahale. Before we get into the battle, let's take a moment to look at both armies which face each other at the Battle of Cynosepahale. The Romans had about 2,000 infantry, about 9,000 from the Punic Corps, more than 2,000 javelinists were out front, while supporting them were 2,500 cavalry and 200 elephants who had been captured at Zama. There were also some Greek allies who supplied 7,500 infantry and 400 extra cavalry. This made the army number up to 32,000 army up to 32,000. The army's only major commander was Flamininus. Rome actually was a very good militaristic drill and had been legitimised as a club during the Punic Wars against Hannibal, and during the first one in fact, when they'd actually gone up against them and been defeated, but then came back into the war with overcoming military. They also influenced other sides. Moving on to Macedon, and Philip's corps had 6,000 phalangists, the famous Macedonian spearmen, 10,000 infantry, 2,000 elite philists, Macedonian javelinists. These were supported by 4,000 mercenaries from Thrace and Illyria, 1,500 hoplites, 2,000 infantry cavalry. This numbered the army 6,500 men less than the Romans at 25,500. The army had several commanders, mainly led by Philip. The other commander was Nicanor the elephant. He was named after killing an elephant. Macedonians had the phalangists out front, which makes sense, especially with the tactics which had been used by Alexander during his campaigns against the Indians and then against Persia. Philip had sent half his troops away on a foraging mission, so when he heard where the Romans were, he ordered Nicanor to wait for them while he charged. Flamininus had also sent half his troops, not wanting to waste troops in case this was a trick by Philip, and also attacked, despite having less experienced troops. Despite having the more experienced troops though, Flamininus managed to find himself on the back foot due to the 8,000 phalangists who charged into his men, cutting a quarter of them down immediately. The cavalry clash on the wings was just as brutal, with just as many men being killed. being pushed back, Philip was just about to call for the other half of the army to charge when Nicanor and the other units appeared. And Philip, unfortunately for Philip, they were disorganised and they were mown down. Seeing that his right flank had been decimated, and potentially with his left being outflanked, Philip decided to retreat, saving forces and ending the battle. The Battle of Cynosepahale had been a decisive defeat for Philip and had once again proven the might of the Roman army. Philip had to sue for peace to save his kingdom and had to become the laughingstock of the whole Greek Empire. Antiochus the Great now saw an opportunity, having defeated Philip, Ptolemy, to reunite the Macedonian Empire. And in our fifth episode in the Hannibal series, and the next episode in the invasion of Greece, we will look at the Battle of Clanicus.